in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking, with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? How are we doing today? Shout out to Blind Guy, his wife, their life. I'll be on their show tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. I will be there. It is in my community tab. I will be there. 11:30 a.m., I believe, Eastern Time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one and all. And today what I would like to do is continue along a line of light deliberations about critical thinking, the application of wisdom, and what exactly stops us from getting there easily. What exactly is it that makes that thing so difficult? What thing? Well, applying real time reasoning skills in critical aspects of our life, where there's emotional heat attached, previous stories attached, predefined grooves and habits already defined. How do we bring enough presence to bring real time critical reasoning? Ladies and gentlemen, we talked about that last time. We talked about that a little bit. So we're back to say a shout out to Aaron B in the house. And shout out to Suthingoti. Shout out to each and every one of you. And we shall let it marinate. But the last episode of the similarly titled stream, we went over the idea of critical thinking and we talked about how it is beset on either side by enemies. The reason why the application of wisdom is so difficult. Why? Shout out, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron B in the house. Let me go ahead and get my act together. As we populate, please go ahead and click the like button. Populate the likes, the participation, the chats. Shout out to you. Welcome. Give yourself a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see here. And that. And the Earth is overpopulated. Shout out to you. Shout out to you. Setting us off in a very proper manner. L Bogey in the house. L Bogey, L Bogey, L Bogey in the house. L Boogie in the house. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much for the $5, $4.99, $5 super chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, where were we? And where are my manners? Why? Okay. We're going to continue down this path of critical thinking. We're going to continue down the path of the application of an accumulation of knowledge and experience. Call that wisdom. Okay. Wisdom has to do with the application of the accumulation of knowledge and experience. And you have to apply it in real time to critical aspects of your life for it to be substantial. It is precious. It is a desired attribute. We want wisdom. We want to be able to apply wisdom and so on and so forth. What is the issue? What is the difficulty? Well, basically, there's certain action potentials you got to overcome. Number one, thinking takes energy. Thinking takes a lot of energy, a critical mass of energy, not just the recollection of memories and so on and so forth. But Dr. Thunder, you know the difference between scratching your head thinking, stumbling over your internal images and words thinking, um, beads of sweat forming on your temple thinking, versus just sitting and going through the menu at your favorite restaurants to just decide what you're going to get. One is thinking, the other one does not get above the energy threshold that thinking actually takes. Does that make sense, Dr. Thunder? Give me a one if that makes sense. One is going down predetermined grooves and stories and pathways about your favorite meal, what it would feel like to have it today. Your stomach and your spleen and your blood vessels are having a conversation about proteins and carbohydrates. The other one, where you're really thinking, there's an energy threshold you got to get past. But that's not the only block to this, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the only block. How's everybody doing? How is everybody doing this evening? I see a one. I see a one from Dr. Thunder. I see a one from Dr. Thunder. Okay. So we have blocked on one side that we have to overcome a certain energy threshold. And then on the other side, what's blocking us is an emotional block, emotional inertia. This one is actually even more powerful. It stops us by funneling and channeling our minds through a familiar pattern, a familiar story, a familiar excuse, a familiar causal chain of why things are not going to change, a familiar fatalism, a familiar everything that is wrong with the world is out there, not in here. This is the way we've always done things. No one has done it like this before. All those other kinds of things. This is a different block to critical thinking. That's why critical thinking is so difficult. It's because when it comes to applying real time reasoning skills to critical aspects of our lives, the entire being rises up in a chorus of stories, pre recorded and pre digested prejudices of all kinds that blocks that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Inertia is the resistance to motion. And El Bogey says that's why people won't change their current situation. Change requires energy. The thinking to begin with requires energy, requires overcoming these deeply worn grooves in terms of mental pathways that you already have developed. Inertia is the resistance to change. Inertia is what makes it difficult to stop a moving object, to change the direction of a moving object, to accelerate a moving object. The resistance to change, the resistance to want to stop after it's moving, the resistance to move when it's standing still, inertia. And we have that same thing in terms of our internal workings. Well, why would it not be that? Does anyone out there believe that, okay, there's inertia out there in the world, there are physical laws out there in the world, but when it comes to our body and our being, oh, those don't apply anymore? If you believe that, can I get a one in the chat? If you believe that you don't have grooved in pathways and preferred states, preferred energy states, and perhaps wanting to stay at a lower energy state than going up to higher ones, similar to what the universe tends to do out there. If you think the laws of the universe don't apply to you, you can give us a one, ladies and gentlemen. This inertia constitutes another hump for critical thinking. Number one, it takes a level of energy, but the bigger one is the whole story world, the world of excuses, the world of causal links, world of what will be, the world of, well, it was not in my cards. Let's see what will happen. That world. That world, ladies and gentlemen. So, how do we tackle this? How do we go about in a simple, measurable, actionable, right, way that understands the workings? Okay, how do we go about tackling this? Well, I got 3 E's, but we'll have to get to them. These 3 E's we'll have to get to are effort, okay, equanimity, and engagement. We're going to need engagement in order to overcome that which doesn't want you to engage, that which wants you to go down these familiar paths, that which wants you to operate at a lower energy state by simply just outsourcing the reaction and the mental activity because you're not thinking then. Because Dr. Thunder already agreed with us. He said, hey, he knows the difference between thinking and just sitting there, recalling memories, deciding where to go, what to wear. That's not really thinking. We know what thinking is when you're trying to redraw the maps, not just drawing from already existing stuff in a low energy frame. Energy drinks do help, as a matter of fact. I would suspect they do, right? So let me go ahead and share something, if I may here. Application. No particular reason why there should be a chess piece there. No particular reason. Just so happens to be that. So, what are we saying again? Critical thinking is beset on both sides by major obstacles. The application of wisdom has two major obstacles in front of it. It is not a question of some kind of epiphany you're going to get and you're going to float around like Yoda and become wise. No, okay? You got to overcome certain humps, one of which is energetic, and the other is in Storyville, as we like to call it over here. So let's talk a little bit about that Storyville thing, okay? Saying, okay, critical thinking, the application of wisdom has to overcome stories and pre-digested thoughts and prejudices. So let's say, for example, one of our favorite channel mascots, Young Swift. Let's say the infamous Young Swift comes in and he has to go. Well, Young Swift has a problem. So let's try to solve Young Swift's problem, okay? With hey, who's there?
It's I.
It's you. So yeah, I was continuing our conversation, uh, laying out certain things about what critical thinking, the application of wisdom, if you will, has to overcome. And what do you have to say about the stories and the pre-digested notions and prejudices? Any prejudices about that?
Yeah. Can you explain a bit more? Can you expound on what you mean?
Okay. What I mean is this: Young Swift has an issue. It's not a big deal. It's just a way of life. So young Swift, as he leaves his young life, has come to the point where he has to go to college. Okay. And he has two choices. He just got the notion or the letter of admission, okay, to his dream college, not the local college. Okay. Not the local college where his granddad and his dad went to and where he has special innings and so on and so forth and he's a name in the community. No, that's one side of things. He also got in, but he does not have the family support and certain other things. And in other words, there are these factors. Okay, he could go and study the particular branch of engineering that his dad is into, and then he can run the store, he'll save money, so on and so forth. Anyways, there's another story about the college, which is out of town, the Dream University. However, it's far away and it's going to lead to empty piggy banks and stuff like that. It's going to be a little expensive. It's more prestigious school, so on and so forth. Now, what's going to be happening in young Swift's mind is what I'm talking about when I say stories and pre-digested thoughts. So there's going to be a story about how that particular local university is the family alma mater or whatever. The school that his grandfather went to, his father went to, the Swift family, okay, goes to that school. Elder sisters went there. They're all PhDs and everything. So there's that story going through there. And that pulls him in a certain direction. It gives him a certain familiarity and warmth, right? There's a predetermined groove that his mind is going through. This is a story. This is a pre-digested notion, not in real time. He's not in real time thinking any of this. This is old stories. Does that in any way add some context, sir?
Yeah, I think it adds enough context. So, what's the question?
The question is, we can imagine many things that young Swift is doing here in his mind. Okay? But about 90% of them is not thinking. What I mean is this: even if he starts weighing the idea of the prestige that he'll get in that other school, or why he wants to be a certain kind of person, and a certain kind of person doesn't stay home, right? A certain kind of person leaves the home, and so on and so forth. We know how young Swift likes to brag and so on and so forth, right? If all that kind of stuff is going on in his head, and he's also weighing it against his family, his filial ties, is that thinking? Is that critical thinking? Or is he just going through a particular set of well-worn paths, just swimming in the same kind of thing that he has swam in before, feeling the situation, experiencing it, but not sitting there scratching his head with the beads of sweat forming in his temple, which Dr. Thunder gave us as the definition of thinking?
Yeah, that's still not what constitutes thinking, because he's still analyzing, or rather, he's still looking at decisions, choices, potentials that are still contained within the weave of the narrative in his story. There isn't anything else that he's added that is external to that whole event. He's not removed himself completely from the situation and then trying to recreate a new path. He's following the map and saying, okay, if I take this road, I'll end up in this place. But he's not buying a new map without charted environments. So regardless of which way he's thinking about this whole situation, he's still not reaching the threshold of thinking. And the things he's considering, again, they're just things which have been in his own story since he was born. For him to start thinking, he must be able to think, okay, well, what do I want to do? Okay, these are the consequences of my actions. Not these are the things preventing me from doing it, but these are the consequences. Prevention is a way to sort of remove yourself from action. Consequences is an admission that these are the pullbacks. In Newton's law of motion, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So considering a consequence, that's actually taking responsibility of the potential action. But reasons for why he should stay, those that's already within the constraints of non-action. So until you can actually say, if I do this.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Take it. Go ahead. It's
No, you go first. I'll be able to come back.
You say the thinking is not being done because he's not having to draw a new map and so on and so forth. Right? I mean, you're saying now, okay, there's no need to go there to what constitutes new in terms of mapscape.
It just has to be separate from the narrative that's so easily weaved. If my father was, it tends to be the case, right? If you're born a Christian, you remain a Christian. Or perhaps a small chance you might become atheist. It's very rare for you to convert and become a different religion. Say, this is true for all religious people. And these people are all convinced that they chose that particular religion when it just was weaved into the particular narrative. Until you've actually considered the escape of that religion, right? And I don't mean just you've dabbled, you've read a little bit. No, until you've actually thought this religion could be false, and how false is it? To what extent you're still just playing according to your parents or societal narrative. This is not good or bad. I mean, it just is what it is in that particular frame. So until he considers, okay, what if I'm not going to go to even university? What are my actual options? You have to start from the base of, all potentiality as opposed to just following that stream of narrative. He is the baker's son who is choosing, instead of working in his family's bakery, opening his own bakery shop. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that still isn't constituting critical thinking yet. He has to be willing to break his mold and then reconstruct it if he chooses to. If he still wants to go to his parents or family local university, that's also fine if he's critically analyzed the situation.
It's not about the final choice. It's about the ability to bring real-time consciousness to bear, right? So, and that's what we're trying to elucidate. That's what you asked the question about. Now it seems like we've made it clear, at least to what we mean by these stories and pre-digested stories and prejudices. And also, we're describing that they're easier to fall into. We're relying on the intuition, or you are relying, sir, on the intuition of your interlocutor, right? You're saying it feels easier to flow into this stuff, right? And we're getting that sense that we know what we mean by when we say that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. See, it's like, I mean, okay, you haven't particularly broke past, or you hadn't broken past your narrative until you started doing your channel. For example, you followed the Nigerian family structure. You went out to America. You got yourself a useful degree. You didn't do philosophy, did you? No, you studied engineering. You got a job in engineering. You set up your own company in engineering. You followed the Nigerian American dream and you participated in that whole narrative. It's only now one could ask that, or could add that you are finally sort of being critical about your narrative. But it's only been the case because you've obtained something that can feed that inertia. To be able to overcome the inertia, you have to be able to feed it. You have to have an energy, so something of equal worth or greater, to feed that initial waste of energy. That, because ultimately it's like this, right? If someone comes and makes fun of you for something that you are very secure about, you don't really care. But when someone comes for you, something you're still finding it hard to attain, or be, that's when there is the insecurity that meets that insult, or whatever. So in your case, you have reached that point of materialistic success. So therefore, you're actually free, both mentally, physically. You proved your intellectual capabilities. You proved your monetary capabilities. So now you're able to now obviously overcome that inertia and then do something which is less local to the typical Nigerian American. Starting a YouTube channel talking about philosophy and all these concepts, this is not typical. This is now, I would say, perhaps you're engaging outside of the Storyville for your particular narrative.
Okay. So you need to amass a certain amount of energy to overcome it. A certain amount of energy needs to be expended, perhaps to accumulate capital in the particular example or the particular way in which you've put it, in order to get there.
Yeah. I mean, in some instance, for example, in physics, instead of calling it inertia, you might call it activation energy. You need to have enough energy to activate a system. So until you reach that critical energy, the system's still inactive. You're putting energy into it, but nothing is being done yet. So to overcome the inertia, you really do need to have some kind of basic stability. Like, it's like a house. If you're going to build a house, you have to have a strong foundation. Otherwise, whatever you build isn't going to be it's not going to stand, literally. So before overcoming the inertia, the person must be stable at that particular front or something that relates to it. In order for him or her, let's say a young Swift decides to go to the more prestigious university, there is going to be issues there too. There is obviously the intellect aspect. If you're going to be with a more prestigious university, it's likely that you'll meet people who are also just as, if not more intelligent than you. So then you also have to overcome that aspect of performing at that level. But if you go to a local one, usually they don't tend to be as prestigious because you have less talent because it's local. You might even be able to fit that narrative nicely. It's why the baker's son becomes a baker, because if he goes out there and tries to become a woodwork or a merchant, he's dealing with the unknown. There isn't kind of like a background base where he knows that, okay, I'll be fine somehow. So it's understanding or creating that fineness that actually allows the individual to believe in themselves in order to actually push forward.
Let's linger around here for just a little bit longer. So, because I think that there is a tendency for us to start thinking, or some people to start thinking, that pre-digested thoughts, right, are out there in the world, and I know where to avoid them, right? And therefore, I'll just keep my thought diet clean and I'll be fine. I would like us to perhaps prove or disprove this point. It is not about necessarily the quality of the thought, even though that is, shall we say, kind of the goodness of the quality of thought is, kind of a tautology. It's a implied. Okay, but regardless of the quality of thought, you can have pre-grooved patterns. It may be a good idea, for example, to go get an engineering degree and follow the Nigerian way. Point, right? However, it doesn't mean that you following that are somehow better than someone who's blindly following some other myth that they digested from some other place, right? Because it is the real-time application of reasoning skills to critical problems, critical areas of our life, that real time opening up the actual map, scratching the head, redrawing the thing, that is what's important, not the quality of the program you happen to be running.
Yeah, some people are luckier that they have a slightly better program. So, for example, Nigerian Americans do have an advantage in that their parents would have drilled a very good quality program in their minds. But ultimately, it still is a program, and until you're able to reprogram yourself, that's when critical thinking obviously takes shape. Being able to reprogram. In my case, I was good at computing. I was good at computers. I could have taken the path of computing science. I didn't. I stuck to more traditional,
you know, stuck the walls. Anyways,
that's actually a good one. Interesting. Right now, I do analyze samples of walls. So in any case, I could have gone on the computing aspect. And in fact, it probably would have been better for me in terms of money. And it's something that I was naturally good at. Now, still, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm reconsidering that whole event, the narrative versus what I could or should have done in the end. People are surprised I didn't do computing science, etc. Now, it doesn't really matter what you did. Wisdom obviously requires a baseline or a reference, should I say, of past events and knowledge. So to apply wisdom, you actually need to actually have a data set. So it's really irrelevant if you know what you did in the past or what's relevant is how you do what you do with what you know. And if you can solve your particular problems, you shouldn't be in a case whereby you have a problem and then you're telling people your problem for empathy reasons alone. There should be something more than just explaining a problem for empathy.
Okay, so if you stop there, let me bring some kind of feeling image talk / my brand of phenomenology to the fore. So there's something about you telling people, for you say empathy, right? Okay, sure. Fine. There is something that is brewing in you that wants you to spill it out. However, if you act, it's the same energy, so this argument goes, that is needed to do the work. In other words, if you feel like, oh, I should go bloviate right now and talk about how I just, set up this sweet contract and did blah, 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 and it's all ready to go. Rather than do that, I find that if I shut up, it's almost like a bottled up, powder keg of energy. And boom, I explode all over the computer, over the phone, all over, blah, blah, blah. Interesting sight. But point being, I can get it done because I didn't say it, because I didn't let this release valve. That wanting to say, it's like almost like open a release valve to get some satisfaction that is due to you for doing the work, not due to you for telling other people, right? Because you cannot help the reaction that the organism has when it sees the accolades from other people. it is partially now satisfied that yes, I am a whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, people obviously seek different things, and I don't want to digress too much, but we have people who are more internally driven, and then there are people who are more externally driven. In your show with Joan the other day, you were talking about Steph Coe is a young woman who again looks average in attraction. She looks like a 5 out of 10, which is normal. Yet she seems to not be able to actually attract a man to want to be able to commit to her. Now, the interesting thing here is we can use this as a wisdom case study as well as young Swift, is that the particular problem she's suffering from isn't so difficult to solve. It's her perspective, or how she sees herself, how she views herself in the world, that's the problem. Again, she's average in attraction. What she could do, or rather who she could be, is someone who's less bitter and jaded. I would say that about 80% of the reason why she's not finding a man who wants to commit to her is because she simply doesn't have the personality or the attenuation to the world that's pleasant. She's not calm. She's not. No, she's calm. Sorry, she's not friendly. She's not sweet. She doesn't smile. She doesn't talk nicely to people. All the aspects that you might expect from a woman, especially if you're a man who has some kind of standards or value, she doesn't really have. She's intelligent. She can have a reasonable conversation, but everything that makes a person unique, she seems to be lacking, especially internal thoughts, self, things that derive from the self. They seem to be non-existent. She seems like she's just a mirror of the outside world to
Yeah, I think
herself,
that
which is
I'm glad you brought that up. It was rather glaring, you know. It was stark, the level of the layer upon layer of external kind of. It was the Catholic Church, it was my parents, and then high school did this, and then this person did that, and then I met every douchebag, and then, and that has nothing to do with. I think I'm glad you brought it up because it's the perfect example of what we're talking about, right? There is a kind of a network of causal chains that is out there, which is a story, right? Um, History, whatever you may call it, and you can glom onto that all kinds of blame and fault, causation after all, such that it fits a story whereby you don't actually have to do anything in real time. Again, you don't have to stop, force a situation in, again, have beads of sweat forming on your um, temple. But let me ask you this. I'm saying I got like 3 E's for this. I'm going to attack it with engagement. I'm going to attack it with this equanimity, right? Which is allows young Swift to look at the faraway university and take all that pre-recorded stuff and not allow it to move him into action space, decision space. It's already done fatalism space, right? But to be able to be calm in all the thoughts, both on both sides, right? Regarding whatever it is, whether it be the example that you gave of the show with me and Joan, or with young Swift, or with whatever. It's I have to be present, right? Hence the real time part. Is that the same thing we're saying? Presence is needed here. That's why it's real time reasoning skills, right?
I mean, presence is minimal, but obviously it's
You say it, but I
that's what
I
it is.
I, I tend to see it as the biggest hurdle. It is a
All right, when I said
minimal
minimal,
requirement. It is necessary. Yeah, I
yes,
got you what you're
that's what I
saying, but
mean.
make it clear for the non PhDs.
Okay, okay. Without presence, obviously, this becomes a very difficult thing. I don't think this woman particularly understands that she has agency. I think she is actually a determinist. However, she doesn't understand what she is. So what she does is she acts like she's not determinist in the world, meaning she thinks that she has free choices. yet all the way she's explaining every event in her life is deterministic. If you're going to start to mix things up in your mind, oh, okay, sometimes the word is deterministic, sometimes it's I have agency, and you judge other people, and then you judge everything but yourself, that's when things start to get messy. I will suggest decide what you want to actually believe in this world. Are you a determinist, or are you someone who thinks and believes in free will? Because if you're a determinist, well, yeah, that's the sentiment. What will be. It's reasonable, fine.
Okay.
But that also means you
I get
can't
it.
judge others, right? Because, well, what people did is based on every experience that they had since they were a child. So there was no other way for things to have gone. So you lose that ability to judge, which is something which they don't want to lose anyways.
Yeah, so there are layers of contradiction here. There's the determinism, the fatalism, but then there's also judgment going on a lot in terms of people of this sort, for example, especially when the social case, the case of relationships, is always a good one for talking about human psychology. But anyways, notice all the reasons why, all the external reasons that she gave why she may have one or two hangups about something, and she never quite specified from the internal point of view why I'm weird, why people say I'm weird or whatever it may be, right? But she didn't explain away the faults and the foibles of all the other douchebags in her life, right? She just said that she's been very unlucky. She's met every douchebag in the planet, right? She did not afford them the same leniency of determinism and fatalism and, hey, you know what? I'm sure it was because of this, that, and the other. In other words, there's agency going on over there, but not over here with me.
There's a term for that. I call it Ruthian logic. There's a reason why it's called that term. It's basically the logic that when it comes to me, I know myself. I have reasons which are valid and justifiable for my actions when society or others believe it not to be the ideal behavior. However, when other people have similar behavior, they don't actually have a reason for it, or they're not justifiable. It's a very what's that word? Solipsistic notion that exists. It's Ruthian logic. This is actually, if you're going to apply wisdom, you must first break through this inertia, as you called it, of Ruthian logic. You must understand that if you have valid reasons, other people also have valid reasons, and that's not really the point here. Because ultimately, as we introduce the blame mechanics, they're trying to reestablish blame. That's why they're trying to justify themselves while other people are not justified. So,
yeah, I like that a lot. We started out with this idea here, those words in red, the stories, pre-digested thoughts, notions. Okay, a web of causality, it is there. And then you can layer all kinds of things on it that may seem innocuous or just, oh, this is just a normal thing to do, a wise course of action or whatever, but you're still following a program. You're still going down a groove. You know, you're not overcoming the inertia of having to think.
Let me put this in there quick, just before you finish.
Go ahead.
I want to give an example of Ruthian logic. I have rethought the one I wanted to say, but a classic one is the marriage situation. If you look at the narrative, the story of marriage and divorce, right? When the middle-aged man decided to go and buy an expensive, or just not even expensive necessarily, buy a motorcycle or some kind of flashy instrument, he would be shamed by society, the wife and the wife's friends, and say, "Oh, you're just a middle-aged man. You're just insecure about yourself, you know, etc." If he then leaves his family for whatever reason, right? If he then leaves his family for whatever reason, it's irrelevant. He's then judged harshly. There is never, and I mean, I've not seen one time in any common society, I'm sure there are, that's not the point, where he's told, "Oh, you're just trying to be happy." He's seen as a someone who left his family, someone who left his wife, someone who left his poor kids. But if it's the reverse with women, Ruthian logic applies in this case. Well, she didn't divorce her husband who wasn't abusive or anything. She was in an unhappy, unfulfilled marriage. She's seeking herself. She's finding herself. she's finding happiness. Even if she destroys the lives of that kid, she's not destroying the life of the kid. She's being happy. So notice Ruthian logic applies to her in this case. She has valid and justifiable reasons to leave her family, and it is self-fulfillment and happiness. For him, that logical reason doesn't apply. Now, this same logic also applies to individuals who apply it to other people of other groups or whatever they deem somehow separate to self.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at this thing called blame mechanics, which you just introduced. We talked about it last time, okay? And recall how we got here. We got here by saying, what's this thing called critical thinking? Why can you put a word critical in front of thinking? It's like that thing called active listening. It's just listening. It's just thinking. Hey, however, we chased it down. We chased it down and we cornered it in an alley, and we found out that it was indeed the application of wisdom. The application of wisdom was found in an alley. And we saw, hey, why don't we just use this gem? It's a great thing. After all, it is highly sought after and everything. We want to apply wisdom in our lives. It is that which leads to the leading of a fulfilling life, a happy life, a life with outcomes that are great, not just for you, but for family, so on and so forth, and perhaps even leaving a legacy into the future. However, it is beset on both sides by energy level. Okay, you got to put in the energy, you got to scratch the noggin, you got to force yourself from not going into those predetermined paths. And then at those predetermined paths, because they have a story component to it, a social component to it, constitute another vast roadblock. Okay, so now there's the blame mechanics, which can we juxtapose that with the responsibility mechanics? What's on the other side of blame mechanics, if you will?
Yeah, as you said, it's responsibility mechanics. That means that you have already understood the personal position to blame, right? Let's use a criminal legal system here as a case study. The law will choose the person to blame. If someone comes and robs your house, there is a person to blame. If that person can be found and caught, they'll be punished or held responsible. Responsibility mechanics doesn't focus on the blame because it's a passive system anyways, right? All human systems have something to actually focus on the blame. It's passive. There's no need to focus on it. Responsibility mechanics chooses to focus on, well, okay, my stuff has been stolen. I have a gig in New York City. I need my guitar to play it. How do I make sure that I fulfill the contract that I had with this gig so that I don't lose other things in the future? That's when you start to be applying the wisdom. You're taking responsibility. You're saying, okay, my guitar is gone and that sucks. I've called the police. I've filed the insurance forms. Now I need to actually fix my actual problem. I'm taking responsibility of how I'm going to fulfill my contract with the gig agency who was paying me for several blah, blah, blah. You're taking responsibility. The blame has already been processed, passive, you've done all the thing. Now you're taking responsibility. The blame has to be passive. If you're focusing on the blame, then you're clearly focusing on the thing that is pointless to your particular life.
Let me ask that you use some of your NE here, sir. Let me ask that you use some of your imagination and paint us something. What would young Swift's life look like? You pick the scenario. You can start with the university scenario. If he was always in the habit of using real-time critical thinking, if he was always in the habit of looking at new ways, looking at new paths, and not, what would it look like? Just will he be doing the same? Will it be more chaotic, less chaotic, more successful, maybe less so,
Yeah.
more of an outlier? What would it look like?
See, okay, to answer that question, perhaps let's go first with how would his life look like if he didn't engage with critical thinking or critical reasoning first. If he doesn't engage in critical thinking or reasoning, what will happen is what happens to most people is that they get older, they start to go through their childhood, right? They go see a therapist and the therapist says, well, this is like this because of your childhood. If that's the thing which the therapist tells you, then something's already wrong because it means you've never really learned or to apply and start to break down all these things. There's a safety in going down the local university route, is that, okay, this is a pre-designed, designated route. If something goes wrong, guess what? I can blame my parents. I can blame them for not equipping me for this. I can blame them for ensuring and focusing that I must go down this path. That there's a sense of security that comes along with following these sets of narrative. Blame, as a young Black man in X, blah blah blah. There's blame, right? So and blaming external things to self feels good because it allows you to kind of feel, you know what, it's not my fault, it's not my responsibility. Now, what would happen though? Obviously, the negative aspect is the loss of your own mental health. Because if you are involved in a situation when things don't go the way that you hoped, wished, or were told it to be the case, you start to have an internal anguishing thought because you've not actually manifested your own internal equanimity, clarity, and sensory, all the stuff you talk about. Now, let's assume that he did start to apply wisdom. What would happen is there would be a sense of chaos whereby he would make a few stumbling blocks because he's interacting with a new environment that he hasn't charted. If you're Columbus,
hold on, and you go right on, okay? But basically, right there, I think it's absolutely key. For the record, the first thing, and that's why I asked this question, it's going to be stumbling blocks and it's going to be a little chaotic. Just like when Abraham was asked to leave, and you can go with your Columbus thing, but basically, it's going to be chaos. You're going to be you're going to bump against things by definition. So when people talk about critical thinking and application of wisdom, it is not a question of, I just don't have the wisdom. I haven't done my thing yet. Maybe I need more, whatever. It's like, well, no, it's because it's a fight. It's because it's a battle against the world when viewed as a... Anyways, go on. Columbus did what?
Yeah, I mean, people like Columbus, well, they went to charter new lands that had not been discovered by many people. And I say many people there. Before people come for me in the future saying, Africans were already in America, Chinese were already in America. Okay, that's cool. So people like Columbus, explorers, etc., they charted places and environments that had not yet been found. Most Europeans will go to Africa, go to India because they know these places, etc. He got lost, found his way around, he stumbled, people got scurvy, many of his shipmates died on the voyages, etc. But he's remembered, for better or worse, as someone who discovered something great and is able to move that past. It's the same thing internally to your own mind. To go down a path that's not been charted, it's not going to be easy. You need to literally recreate your own maps, go there, and there's a lot of paddling. There's a lot of, it's not easy. But the good thing is once you chart your own mind, guess what? You have freedom. If that woman that we're talking about, or rather young Swift, had developed or goes to develop these thoughts and ideas, he's going to have so much freedom because, first of all, with applying wisdom, you start to realize a couple things. There is the internal self, and then there's the external self. There's internal and external objectivity. For example, right, when women say things like, well, I'm a 10, if there's nothing wrong with that internally. You should think of yourself as a 10, actually, internally, whatever that means. Externally, you also must be obviously aligned to what other people think of you. Again, it's only as relevant as it will be reflective on how others treat you.
Okay, the whole thing about saying, just call yourself a 10 internally is that, okay, and what you are telling them to do really, what I'm saying is you're not giving the whole sauce. You're like this kind of guy that's just kind of giving them this very thin soup, a thin soup with a few kind of onions, kind of, like the desert onions kind of floating around on the top of the pot. But when you say, hey, just go ahead and give yourself a 10, what you're saying is have a space within you, and we need not go down this path, but you have a space within you where there is no limit, to recognize the infinite, right? There is no measure, there is no, in terms of you generating your worth and all that kind of stuff. In other words, it's not just you calling yourself a 10 and then, I'm a 10 and the little psyche thing that you will do.
Let me clarify, because I think D said, I respectfully disagree. No woman should consider themselves a 10 internally, or man for that matter. Let me go and actually clarify, because I guess Ike did try to catch me out there. When I say you should see yourself as a 10, is you are a human being, right? You are the most being existing itself is one of the most significant things that could ever have had happened. The fact that you can think, you can feel, you can experience life. This is something that can't be quantified. So you should have in your own structure of how you view yourself something close to infinity. There should always be you're seeking perfection within your own self. You thinking of yourself as a 10, it's not at all, I think I'm the most beautiful person in the world or anything. It just means that you understand that there's nothing else that can match your existence in this world, because there isn't.
So yeah,
But what
because
that
basically
means is,
what you're doing is this. You're like, okay, there's something called being a good man, and then there's something called making money. Now there's some kind of correlation in terms of certain virtuous virtues, if you will, that are kind of, they kind of show themselves in both people, blah blah blah. And then you're like, oh, think of yourself as a billionaire, and it's like, no, you're supposed to be thinking of yourself as a good person. That's the analogy here, where it's like, okay, think of yourself as a 10. It's like, no, it's a slightly different lane on the self-worth thing. Now, billionaire is nice. It's also kind of good for the self-worth thing, and it takes the same kinds of pursuit, whatever the hell it may be, right? But it's on a separate lane, and that's why I wanted to call you out there, because you're just saying, oh, think of yourself as a 10, as though it was some kind of, it's like you're passing candy to babies. You know, we should be more respectful of the audience, sir.
No, but
you are
but
10.
You see.
You are 10. Yeah, keep singing that, and you will be okay.
But I did clarify, I said, internally, think of yourself as a 10, but externally, be self-aware of what the external environment judges you at. You know, the greatest artist might not even recognize that he's a great artist until he's dead, right? It's a matter of how the external world reflects with your own internal artistic sense. So yeah, see yourself as that maximum, the maximum potential. But then obviously acclimate yourself and attenuate yourself to what the market out there thinks of you. That's what 100%. Kind of creates that realistic.
It's about that attenuating yourself to the highest, attenuating yourself to the most high, if you will.
Right.
Same principle all over the place. It's so simple, isn't it?
Yeah. So, you know, for example, that woman there, the issue is though, right? And I get where Dee's coming from. The issue is that woman is, she sees herself as as an 8 or 9 in her mind. And then she sees all these guys who come approaching her as 2s and 3s and 4s who she doesn't want. And she only wants the 8s, 9s, and 10s. So she's basically miscalibrated to reality. And she truly believes that in herself.
Going on altogether on that side of the lane.
Exactly.
Right? So it has nothing to do with, anyways, yeah.
But I think that's what Dee is trying to kind of down that lane. It's the miscalibration that will occur if you truly see yourself as an 8, and then you judge others for not being that same 8 that you see yourself. So what's happening is you're mixing internal versus external things, and then creating and merging them into one thing, and then it's just getting messy.
Getting messy indeed. So blame mechanics, and you said the opposite is responsibility mechanics. Okay, that's kind of where the last stop that we had, and since then, Mr. What shall I say, Doctor? The good doctor's thoughts have been on the screen. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat, giving us a quote there about determinism and what is to be done. The what is to be done thing in terms of like, are you in a simulation? Are you not in a simulation? Are you this? Are you that? Oh, but Pascal's wager, not Pascal's wager. Those things tend not to really matter much. I don't know if you have anything to say about that whole flea market over there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this question here is determinism or free will, and this comes from a very philosophical position, so we won't delve too much into it, Dr. Lightning, but this is one of those things that cannot be resolved, right? I think part of applying wisdom is knowing questions that can be answered and questions that can't be answered. So part of wisdom is actually saying, okay, we really don't know if everything is determined, whatever that means, or if everything has axioms of free will. But what we do know is the kinds of people that have a certain kind of mentality have a certain kind of life and experience. So what you do is you find the way that people live that give the highest level of experience, and then you promote that way of thinking, because ultimately
Yeah, and if you
can't
can
resolve that
enact it,
meaning.
then I guess it was meant to be, right?
I don't want to go there, but
Well, I mean,
yeah,
look, my bad.
I have a
I'm the
pet
pragmatist here, right?
peeve. I have a pet peeve against that term.
Against
Yep, pet
against the
peeve.
illogical things like what I just said about, like, well, you could believe it and not
Yeah, it's
believe it.
like no,
Just
no.
make
I
it
won't go
work. Just
down that far. Like,
hey.
I won't go down that far. I mean, I'm not gonna
Come
come for
on,
you,
you come
but
John us the salesman over here. It can be and not
no,
be as long
because
as you're whooping and wolfing. Go ahead.
no, you do need a certain level of principles that allow you to sort of attenuate yourself properly. Otherwise, you'll start to make internal contradictions that lead you to actually failure. Again, if you bring that woman again, she says, "Hey, I want kids and a family. You know what? Having kids would have been bad for my body anyways. I would have been miserable. It's actually better I didn't have kids." You see, that's the kind of nonsense. Now, if you start to have internal contradictions, you're not going to be able to make a good solution. If you think that there's a glass ceiling that stops black men from succeeding as Young Swift says, in the bigger university, guess what? That will become your reality, because you
What
won't
is
be
the
able
nature
to
of what's
overcome.
the nature of the jam here? Is it easier, okay, for people to do what you're saying, which is, oh, shake off it, just have a clear logic, right? Or is it easier for people to take the attitude? And I'm not saying that, these things, because there's a third thing, which is the active landscape. Or is it easier to take the attitude of, okay, it may be all determined or whatever, but I'm going to try to do something, and it's still, why bother, or about all this kind of stuff? Like, if it was meant to
Most
be,
people,
then I made it happen, or whatever, that kind of stuff. Who
yeah,
cares? Just get
most
shit.
I think most people are actually better with optimism, and a few people are better with pessimism. And then there's a few people
Hmm.
like me who are just in the middle. Like, it
Blah.
is what it is. I mean, yeah, it's like I don't
Vanilla.
need right. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, my Ruthian logic once asked me, "Hey, what gets you up in the morning? What makes you so excited to fulfill the day?" And I thought to myself, nothing. I don't have any particular things I wake up to. I don't wake up scared like some people.
Yeah, I'd be
I,
scared, bro.
right. I don't have a reason that I wake up. I just wake up because I wake up. So I'm more in the middle. I'm quite rare. Most people are optimists, and a few people are pessimists. Choose the path that you from your experience leads you to things that you want in life. But there's difference between pessimism and living with negativity
Mhm.
as well.
So
Pessimism is just
while we're
accepting that
here,
most
okay,
things don't
while we're here
happen.
on this lane of determinism, and then, optimism, pessimism, there's something about the rightness of the answer or not. Do we know what, can Young Swift know, again, in this land of chaos that he has stepped into now? Okay, he's no longer living in the land of predetermined grooves. He's, for the first time in his life, trying to make this decision. Do I stay over here, kind of do the kind of engineering that we already have a shop for, save money on gas, this, that, and the other, or I could go to that other dream university, take aerospace stuff, and whatever on nuclear energy. But if nuclear energy makes it politically, it'll be huge, but there's no chance that it might. Maybe things will get more regulatory and so on and so forth. Blah blah blah. Is there a right answer in this land of chaos? Is there a right answer in this land of applying real time reasoning to your critical problems?
There are right answers across time, but there is no right answer for every iterative moment or decision that you make. What will happen is you'll have an accumulation of right answers that will then end or form Young Swift's life and experience and happiness. But in each particular event, there is no right answer. There is better, more wise decisions based on the limited information that he may have, which includes ability to kind of foresight. But there is no right answer for each particular thing. But a series of answers will lead to a better life outcome, and that's independent of the specific choices, but it's
We
more
have the
related to
spirit of the series of answers. Okay, we
right.
look over time, mythologies, stories, millennia of evolution, so on and so forth. We see and we abstract from these series of lives and patterns and so on and so forth, what's the one that creates the good outcome? We abstract from that and we say, hey, real time reasoning skills. Hey, what blocks
Okay, you
it?
know what?
These are the blocks, so on and so forth. Go ahead.
Let's mix young Swift up
Your
with
your
this
your your
yeah
your
young
Borgin.
woman
Your
of Steph
Borgin.
Core, right? And this can work for both of them. Young Swift and Steph. Yep, I think I'm. Can you hear me?
Okay, so
Am I
hold on a
audible?
second. Go back and go out and come back in because I think there are two things, both Borgin and might be a delay. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing the conversation about critical thinking. As you can see, it's not just a simple thing. Over here, no. We do not just go ahead and follow the already predigested prejudices. Predigested prejudice. Predigested prejudice. Predigested prejudice. Predigested prejudice.
Right, I
Yeah,
knew Ike was from of a different breed. He was part of the
hey, I
the
can
Kakuna
fake my way into the I'm like, hey, one of you guys. Anyways, continue. You sound better now.
Yeah. Okay, good. So young Swift, we can use young Swift and that young lady, Steph Co, to simulate something. Both of them are from that small town where there's a local university, and both of them are a little bit weird. But young Swift is this, high IQ young black man. Steph Co is a reasonably intelligent young woman who is not apparently the ideal in the region that she lives in. She has a slight strange taste in music compared to other people who look like her, and then the people who don't look like her don't quite value her as the pretty girl. Okay, cool. Now, if young Swift and Steph Co had gone to the larger university, where she would have been, or they would have been exposed to international students from different countries, different cultures, and realize actually, hey, they are the SHIT. Actually, they would have both found people who would have exposed them to different ways of thinking, perhaps invited to a wedding in Nigeria or Ghana or Brazil, and then would have met other people that just varied, improved their experience, and guess what? Young Steph Co would have found her man easily just by exposing herself to an environment change. So what that would have done is it would have included in her narrative that, hey, sometimes it is possible to change the particular ways that your life is going if you just change either the environment. Now, this is still not enough to kind of make a question how to change her own self. That takes a little bit more energy to kind of realize that the problem is internal. It requires several steps. And I think part of this whole blame mechanics is that you want to blame something 100% as opposed to taking partial responsibility. Like it's, you need to
See,
understand, yes.
when I hear you, there's a bias I hear, obviously, and I'm just saying this kind of absolutely subjectively, like, oh yeah, I'm reporting right now. I hear a bias as to, oh, well, you need to overcome these particular logic flaws you're making here, son. I think this is very critically important. And for me, I'm just like, no, that's not the important part. Like, it's never gonna. That doesn't lead anywhere. In other words, There's no hill there for me, right? So I easily roll past that one. And the hill is in enacting shit, right? In overcoming the emotional inertia, for example. The kind of the logic. Anyways, what do you have to say about my report?
Okay, yeah. So the overcoming inertia, that's the second half of what I was saying. I was focusing more on the sort of a matter of fact things first, because the emotional inertia stuff, it's difficult to overcome that without kind of exposing yourself to people who might be in a similar situation as you and have succeeded. Some people need that because the bias you might have is you might be an internal person. Someone like her, that woman, she's a very external person. She needs to have mirroring effects in order to move forward and understand something. She has to see someone literally in the same situation or worse than her succeed in the same thing that she couldn't for her to be able to even consider what you're saying. the whole internal clarity and, just overcoming through it, your own particular narrative, attacking your own stories, and this is a very difficult thing to do.
Is it a dark
Really
thing?
difficult.
Were you getting, was that a Freudian slip? You were like, this is very dark. Anyways.
Yeah, I don't want to go there because it's part of shadow mechanics, right? Going down the path of self-discovery. Part of wisdom is accepting all the flaws that are internal to self that led to all these douchebags that you keep meeting, for example.
Mhm.
That is part of the whole wisdom thing. It's like accepting that you are actually bringing forth these douchebags to your life. These people aren't just person you meet wants to do bad things to you. That's not just to do with luck. That's to do with what you actually manifest. Yes, and I use that term. It's a cringe term, manifest, but it's real. How you be, yeah, how you be is definitely starts to kind of bring forth certain kinds of people in your life, and you got to take responsibility for that, 100%.
Double J James Jackson. James Jackson from downtown, $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. So this second half that we've come to, or are you done? Are we sufficiently cleared up the fact that you got to get over, and how you may be able to get over this thinking thing, and what percentage of people are able to get over this, the right, as you call it, the matters of truth, right? What people are able to see, okay, well, actually, I'm not thinking in real time right now. Actually, I'm talking from a place of insecurity right now. I'm talking from a place of fear right now. My stomach is in knots, and that's what's talking right now. Okay, don't even listen to me. Okay, it's like my heart is beating through my chest. I'm just talking because stories are flashing in my head. So, what is the survival rate here? How many people can come out of this situation?
Well, yeah, I'm guessing you mean it from just like a general state of people, normal people. Quite a few people can actually.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a few people can overcome this. You're going to suffer some kind of ego death. That's part of this whole wisdom. Ego death
Okay.
is,
Go ahead. I was going to ask that.
yeah, ego death is when basically you've been fed a series of stories since you're a child, right? Your parents tell you, okay, we are Muslims, we don't do this, we are like this, you shouldn't do this, a bad girl does this, a bad boy says this. Now you start to, part of kind of overcoming this wisdom threshold or critical thinking threshold is understanding that your parents meant well with everything that they said, but they didn't know everything enough to your particular way of conforming yourself to this world, and that you don't end up blaming your parents for not preparing for anything or telling you information that happens to be not accurate. You start to uncover these things and say, okay, yes, I do have this behavior that my parents or society told me is bad. I don't think I'm harming anyone. And everyone in the world has things and behaviors they do that harm other people. So why is it that I'm particularly judged harshly for it? You start to uncover these things. It's such, as a man, I can't be expected to not have a job. You start to feel this is unfair because you told that equality is the thing. You start to notice these contradictions between the society and yourself. And for you to come out of the other end, you need to actually accept that, yes, these things are real. There are contradictions with society. So what? And then you decide the path you want to take, knowing that the society is also contradicting themselves against you. You just try not to harm other people, then keep refining it. Like it's a game of to and from. You refine it until you create a way of being in this world that doesn't infringe on other people's rights too much, but still allows you to exercise your own position, and you accept, actually, you know what, yes, according to my parents, according to society, I am selfish. But you then understand what that selfishness even means. Then you might not want to be completely selfish objectively, so you say, okay, but I'm not. And then you refine that selfishness until you find a state that you can accept. but you can't go there and say, "Oh, I'm not this or I'm not that." You need to steelman the society's arguments. Like Steph Co, for example, she used to accept that she is objectively average. Society's not going to see her as a pretty girl. Some guy might, a few guys might, in fact, many guys might, but that's not the point. She has to objectively understand that, then also understand that she's also judging other people, the same rubrics, that this is life, and there's still a nice way to kind of move through that. If you can start to detangle these processes in your mind, you're able to now start to come out the other end.
Interesting. Okay. Nice answer to the question, how many will make it alive? You never quite quantified it, did you?
Well, I think if people had the right guidance, more people make it out than not. Unfortunately, history tells us that most people go through their traumas, and then they go and infringe that same trauma on their kids. It's just a cycle that keeps repeating itself to varying degrees, right? The parents never truly heal. I don't mean this in a woo way. Just they never confront the things that remain dormant in their own shadows, and they inflict the same problems on their kids, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And this is what happens if you don't start to apply wisdom to your life. You just go on into spirals, and you realize across several generations that Young Sweet family, although they're the people that are good at going to local university, that's all that they're good at. Or some other families, like Steph Co's family, perhaps now she will have a kid somehow, and all her kids and the kids' don't have husbands. That in a lot of different cultures, like in Africa, for example, they have these spirits of poverty. Why is it that some families just happen to be in a poverty state, even when they have jobs, potential, and money coming in? They still remain in poverty. Some families have a spirit of drinking alcohol too much. All these spirits that exist, generational spirits, these are really because at each successive generation, there was no sufficient detangling of their internal shadows, and then applying wisdom directly.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Jay Ibrahim. We talked about the collective unconscious, that shadow, it contain the shadow part, and the working of it. So it is a big deal all of a sudden. People say critical thinking, people say wisdom, people say, living the good life from this way, this kind of a subjective way. And make it think that, okay, it's just reasoning skills, or it's just, oh, you just got to do this and that. But then you find out that it goes almost up to the highest heights of a spiritual battle, battling the zeitgeist, both conscious and unconscious.
Yeah, battle of the consciousness, battle of the bands style.
The battle. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted this one to be a short one, anyways, because, and let me see if we can retrace our step back in a way that makes sense, because the idea here is, I think we've closed the loop on how blame mechanics works, but I wanted to throw one little mix in there. Okay. In other words, this blame mechanics is it's a particularly nasty manifestation of that whole Storyville. I am going to look at this kind of fatalistic, deterministic, external, blah blah blah. That whole crazy dance out there, falling into these predetermined grooves, stories, predigested prejudices. We said, okay. Um, the thing I wanted to throw in there regarding blame mechanics is this. The experiment with the monkeys. Or let me not talk about the experiment. Let me just say something like this. As people, let me go ahead and state the experiment anyways. As people, we, okay, we can be held back by a particular story, prejudice, or whatever, okay, and not even know the reason why. We've all seen those experiments where some animals, let's say monkeys, in particular in this case, particularly important, right? I don't know the exact, I'm going to paraphrase. But okay, there's a banana hanging up there, but if they go try to get the banana, everyone gets shocked in the room. So if anyone tries to go get the banana, they're like, hey, stop it. Don't try to get the banana, we'll get shocked. But then they cycled all the monkeys through such that there was no shocking mechanism anymore, or any original monkey that knew the original story of when Zeus used to shock them, right? But they all stop each other from going up to get the banana, right? Now, in an environment like that, so this is the scene already, right? We're not trying to explain what that is, blah blah. We just take that as for granted, as a given here, as a premise. In a scene like that, where people don't really know the objective reasons why, or why are we enemies with those people? Why don't we travel over here? In other words, also, why don't we make certain moves in our family, in our neighborhood, now whatever? Why don't we go across town to try to get jobs or whatever it may be? Now, that thing, or that scenario where you don't know what the reasons are, is great. It's a great powder keg for blame mechanics, because it's almost like there's an invisible hand, right? Because back when it was like a uh electric shock thing, maybe you could scratch your head about maybe we could do blah 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 blah. Now we don't even know why we're in misery. Why we don't even know why we don't have the bananas. So it's open to every story about whatever, right? So the I just wanted to kind of point that out, and then I'll give you the last word on that. I just wanted to show how this mimicry, copying of certain behaviors, copying of certain stories, it then starts to live in the zeitgeist, the spirit of whatever. People don't even know why, but they're held back by this particular spirit and notion. Anyways, go ahead. Seems like you want to say
Yeah, I mean, a modern societal version of that is patriarchy. I mean, yeah, at some point there was an actual hand that did prevent some people's life in some cultures, but that spirit has lived on up to the point whereby even if your group is making more money than the group that you think was inflicting the invisible hands against you, you're still blaming them for all the other things. And
that are
also
wrong with
that
you.
same thing, exactly. Patriarchy is a perfect example of that. It's like, no, there's no such thing that has power over your life at this point, but you blame it, and it's an invisible hand because it was true at some point enough, at least within a certain
Mhm.
perspective, and it still carries on. Same thing with I'm a young black this or whatever. These things are true enough. There was a time when people were getting lynched, for talking to the wrong person. These are facts. But what you've done is you've included facts of a different time and space into facts about a particular time and space in the future, that those things are not relevant. And relevant doesn't mean that it can never happen. It just means they're not the thing that you should be focusing on, and you're still focusing on them. And the invisible hand, every time you try to jump, somehow something fails.
Borgin
Being able
again.
to escape.
Borgin again. So yeah, you were Borgin there for a second.
All right. That was a point made.
Okay, excellent. Now, engagement, equanimity, effort. That's a real battle. That's a real problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out. We are out with a splash. We thank you very much. 19 Bash. Thank you very much for Dr. Thunder. Thank you to the other super chatters in the building. And until next time, we're out.